Get ready to dive into cemetery horror stories where every tiny detail seems harmless until it becomes a full nightmare. Like in the story you're about to hear, where a teenager takes a shortcut through a graveyard and ends up bringing home something way darker than memories. But before we start, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any terrifying stories. And tell me in the comments which city or country you're watching from. I cut through a cemetery to save time. That's all. I didn't go inside, didn't mess around, didn't disrespect anything. It was just a shortcut, a path like any other. But ever since that day, sleep became a battle. Because when you feel something in the room with you, even when you can't see it, you just can't rest. And the worst part? Sometimes what you do see is way too real to be just a dream. Back then, I was about 14. I always walked home from school, and that day, I decided to take a shortcut through the old neighborhood cemetery. It was the kind of place with marble headstones, some with faded photos, others with cracked statues. I'd walked that way before, but that afternoon was different. The weather had turned and the sky had that heavy gray look, like it was about to pour. The air felt still, no birds, no wind, nothing. Just the crunch of my steps on the gravel. Halfway through, I got the feeling someone was watching me. I can't explain it. I didn't see anyone, but it was like eyes were locked on me. As I passed a row of taller tombstones, I heard a whisper, soft and cold, right in my ear. I froze and spun around, but there was nothing. No movement, just that thick silence like the cemetery itself was holding its breath. I sped up and got out of there, tried to forget about it. Got home, showered, ate dinner, watched TV. By the time I went to bed, everything seemed normal. But in the middle of the night, I jolted awake. I realized I couldn't move. I'd heard of sleep paralysis before, but I'd never experienced it. My body was shut down, but my mind was wide awake. And then I saw her. There was a woman standing beside my bed. She didn't look like some cliché ghost. No white veil, no hair in her face. She had short, dark hair and wore modern clothes, the kind someone might throw on for a chilly night out. But what locked me up was her smile. Wide. Wrong. It didn't match her eyes. She stared at me like she was enjoying my fear. She didn't say a word, just stood there, smiling. I wanted to scream, run, turn away, but nothing worked. When I finally blinked, she was gone. I woke up drenched in sweat, gasping, my heart pounding. I sat there for a while, trying to convince myself it was just a nightmare. But deep down, I knew something was off. The room had this negative energy, a weight in the air like something had lingered. The next few days turned into a cycle. I'd fall asleep, then wake up paralyzed with her right there. Sometimes she'd lean in closer. Other times I'd hear her whispering in my ear, words that didn't make sense or maybe in another language. Her smile never changed. It was like she was always there, waiting for something. Each night left me more exhausted, my mind more scrambled. I stopped talking to my parents, got quieter at school, avoided going out. My mom thought it was just teenage angst. My dad said I needed better sleep. But how was I supposed to explain that a woman was waiting for me every night? That I'd wake up feeling like someone had touched me even when the room was empty? It got to the point where I was afraid to sleep. I'd stay up for hours fighting to keep my eyes open. But when sleep finally took me, it was always the same. Paralysis, whispers, that smile. Then one day my mom said my older cousin was coming to stay with us for a few days. He'd be sleeping in my room. The relief I felt was indescribable. Just knowing someone else would be there helped. The first night with him, I slept deeper than I had in weeks. No interruptions. I woke up rested, with no sign of that presence. My cousin seemed fine too. We spent the day laughing, playing video games, goofing around. For the first time in forever, the room felt light. No more feeling watched. The next night, I went to bed hoping it was over. But the peace didn't last. I woke up in the middle of the night needing to use the bathroom. I glanced over and saw my cousin asleep, breathing deeply, tangled in his blanket. The hallway light was off, but a sliver of light crept in from the living room window. I got up slowly, trying not to make a sound. When I opened the bedroom door, I froze. She was there, standing at the end of the hallway, Same woman, same clothes, but her smile, it wasn't the same. Her face was twisted, teeth bared like she wanted to bite me, her head tilted slightly, her eyes locked onto mine. And there I stood, feeling the floor turn to ice beneath my feet. That oppressive presence filled the air again, thick and suffocating. My body locked up. I could feel every muscle screaming to react, but it was like something was holding me from the inside. She started moving toward me, slow. Her steps made no sound. It was like she was gliding. And the closer she got, the darker the hallway seemed, as if the house was being swallowed by something unseen. She got close enough for me to smell her, damp, musty, like something left sealed away for years. Even though she didn't touch me, it felt like her face was pressed against mine. Her eyes changed again. They weren't just scary anymore, now they burned with rage like I'd done something unforgivable. Then the light flicked on. My cousin stood in the doorway, his face still half asleep, his hand on the switch. When he looked down the hallway, I swear I saw the color drain from his face. She vanished, just gone, like she'd never been there. I dropped to my knees. The air rushed back into my lungs, like a weight had been lifted. My cousin rushed over and helped me up. "You saw her, didn't you?" he asked. Before I could answer, he said, "The smiling woman." We stood in silence for a few seconds. The TV in the living room, left on mute, displayed those late-night test patterns. My cousin led me to the kitchen, pulled out a chair, and made me sit. He told me he'd woken up that night too, had a dream about a woman standing at the foot of his bed trying to choke him. He said in the dream, he tried to scream, but nothing came out. She just smiled as she squeezed his throat with impossible strength. The worst part? He woke up feeling like he was still being strangled, and when he opened his eyes, she was still there, standing, watching. The difference was, he reacted. He said he lunged at her, threw a punch, but his arm passed through her like she was made of smoke. She disappeared. He spent the rest of the night awake, staring at the ceiling, pretending none of it had happened. It wasn't until he saw me frozen in the hallway that he realized it wasn't just in his head. We told my mom everything the next day. She called an older neighbor, one of those women who knows about spiritual things. The neighbor came over with a bundle of rue, prayers I'd never heard, and a look that made it clear she knew exactly what she was dealing with. After walking through the whole house, she said that entity had latched onto me since the day in the cemetery, that I'd caught the attention of something trapped there, a thing that fed on fear, and if the cycle wasn't broken, it would slowly consume me. After the ritual, it all stopped. No more paralysis, no more whispers. The woman never appeared again, not to me, not to my cousin. But that doesn't mean we forgot. To this day, when I close my eyes and think about that night, I can still feel the weight of her gaze, the smell, the smile that wasn't just a smile. We moved on, grew up, moved away, kept living. But some things don't fade. They linger in the corners of your memory, and sometimes in the deep quiet of the night, when everything seems too still, I feel that chill again, like someone's watching. Like that shortcut, that simple detour through a cemetery, left a door cracked open. And that door, I was never sure it was fully closed. How terrifying. What did you think about the story? What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your opinion here in the comments. It's scary to think something can attach itself to you just because you walked through a cemetery. But sometimes the danger isn't in your room. It's in places that seem way too peaceful. Like in the next story, where a group of teens learns that even a paradise-looking place can hide dark secrets. There was a time in college when we decided to do something different over the long weekend. No parties, no tourist trips. The idea came from Jake. He always had that kind of eccentric side. He showed up with an old map, some yellowed brochures, and a proposal. Camping on a small, forgotten island near Okinawa. According to him, it was beautiful, isolated, and practically untouched. Perfect for escaping the city noise, he said. At the time, no one stopped to wonder why a place so perfect was never visited by anyone. There were 7 of us. Me, Jake, Mia, Ryan, Naomi, Ethan, and Lily. We planned everything over text and agreed to leave early Friday morning. When we got there, a minibus was already waiting for us, but there was no driver. Seriously. The keys were in the ignition with a note that just said, "Follow the road to the end." Jake thought it was part of the place's charm. I thought it was weird, but I went along with it. The road wound up a mountain surrounded by forest. It was narrow, full of sharp turns, and seemed to get more deserted the higher we climbed. After nearly an hour of driving, the road ended at a kind of plateau. A man was waiting for us up there, smiling, wearing a white shirt and a straw hat. He looked like the only human being for miles. He greeted us like he already knew us. He handed out backpacks with camping gear, lanterns, even sleeping bags. Then he pointed to a trail. "Follow that. 20 minutes on foot. The place is beautiful. Just be careful at night, okay? The bathrooms are farther south, past the rocks. It's a bit of a walk, but you'll get used to it. The forest can be noisy." No one understood what he meant by that, but no one asked either. We grabbed our stuff and headed down the trail. The path looked like something out of a movie. The trees on either side were so tall and close together they formed a green tunnel, barely letting any light through. The ground was soft, covered in dry leaves, and you could hardly hear anything except the sound of our own footsteps. No birds, no animals, just the rustling of leaves in the wind, and even that sounded more like a whisper than an actual sound. It was like we were walking through the entrance to another world. With every step, I got this weird feeling, like something was watching us from the trees, but whenever I looked, there was nothing. After what felt like way longer than 20 minutes, the trail opened up into a stunning clearing. On one side, the forest. On the other, a white sand beach and turquoise water. Honestly, it looked like a hidden paradise. We even forgot about the strange vibe from the trail. We set up our tents, made some snacks, and Mia even went for a swim. Everyone seemed relieved to be there, almost like we'd all just been through something none of us wanted to talk about. Night fell fast. When the sun disappeared behind the mountain, the forest turned into a dark, silent wall. We turned on some lanterns and made a makeshift campfire. Ethan told some dumb horror stories, and Lily started getting nervous. Around 9, she pulled me aside to walk with her to the bathroom. She said she didn't want to go alone. I thought she was overreacting, but I went with her. We grabbed the lanterns and followed the same trail the man had pointed out. The path seemed even more closed in now. The lantern beam only lit up a few meters ahead, and beyond that, it was total darkness. The ground was still soft, but now every step seemed to sink a little deeper, like the forest was absorbing our movements. Lily stayed glued to my side. She kept looking around, her face tense. I asked if she was okay, and she said she didn't like that kind of silence. I didn't either, but I tried to stay calm. We kept walking. About 10 minutes later, she suddenly stopped, grabbed my arm hard, and whispered, "Did you see that?" I looked where she was pointing, but I didn't see anything. Just trees, thin, twisted trunks like frozen shadows. There, between the trees, there are people there, a lot of them. I tried to say she was imagining things, but before I could finish, she shoved me hard, turned, and ran back to camp. I stood there for a few seconds, confused. The forest was still quiet, but now the air felt heavy. It wasn't normal fear. It was that feeling that something was wrong, like time itself had gotten thicker. I ran after her. When I got back to the clearing, she was kneeling by her tent, crying. The others had gathered around her, and when she finally spoke, her voice was shaking. They were just standing there, wearing white robes, old, with long straight hair and dark eyes. They were all staring at us. I thought they were trees, but they weren't. They were standing there, one next to the other, between the trunks. No one knew what to say. Jake tried to calm her down, saying it must have been shadows or a trick of the light, but I knew she wasn't making it up. The way she talked, the panic in her eyes, it was real. She'd seen something, and the forest knew we were there. The night turned into a standoff. No one wanted to admit they believed Lily, but no one dared leave the clearing again. We stayed there, huddled around the fire like it was some kind of protection. Ethan tried to change the subject, Jake laughed nervously, and Naomi just kept staring into the woods. her lantern on the whole time, even though she wasn't pointing it anywhere. Lily didn't say another word. She curled up in her sleeping bag, trembling, her eyes wide open. And me. I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Old women in white robes, standing, watching. No matter how much I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't ignore the tension in the air. The forest felt more alive now, like it was breathing. Every so often you'd hear a snap in the woods, a distant whisper, light footsteps that stopped the second someone turned their head. The fire started to die down, and no one wanted to go get more wood. The truth was, we didn't feel safe anymore, not even in the beauty of that place. The beach, the calm sea, the white sand. It all felt like a trap. In the middle of the night, someone had the brilliant idea to go talk to the man who'd given us the gear. No one knew his name or where he lived, but Jake thought it was best to clear things up right away. I was against it, but I was outvoted. So at dawn, we packed up camp in a hurry and headed back down the trail. The air was heavy, like something was following us between the trees. The backpacks felt heavier. The birds were still absent. The smell of the forest was damp. We barely spoke until we reached the plateau where the minibus was still parked. The man appeared like he'd been waiting for us. Same smile, same calm demeanor. Jake got straight to the point and asked if he'd ever heard of apparitions in that forest. His smile faltered for half a second. A subtle detail, but I caught it. He nodded slowly and said something that sent a chill through all of us. "Oh, you went through the ancestral cemetery, huh? This time of year? They tend to come back." We all fell silent. Lily started crying again. Jake tried to argue, saying no one had mentioned any cemetery. Then came the most absurd part. The campsite's closed this week because of the Festival of the Dead. It doesn't reopen until after. But since you were already here, I figured you knew, and you came of your own free will. No one responded. Our heads were spinning. Everything made sense now. The soft ground, like it had been trodden by bare feet for centuries. The unnatural quiet of the forest. The feeling of being watched. The figures Lily saw. They weren't hallucinations. They weren't shadows. They belonged to that place, and we'd invaded it without knowing. We got into the minibus in silence. Only the engine broke the muffled quiet of the morning. The road back felt longer. Every turn seemed to take us farther from something that shouldn't have been awakened. When we finally made it back to the city, no one wanted to talk. We all went our separate ways. In the days that followed, no one brought it up. We tried to go back to normal, but it was clear that experience had marked all of us. Lily dropped out and moved back in with her parents. Naomi started wearing a Buddhist protection amulet. And Jake? He never mentioned another exotic camping spot again. As for me, I tried to forget. I swear I did. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm sure there's someone standing between the trees in the courtyard outside my apartment, always in the same spot, always looking my way. And that's when I remember something the man had said with a smile just before we left. They only watch, but sometimes they like to follow someone home. Creepy, right? They survived that night of fear, but the question stayed. What were they actually seeing between those trees? And what happens when it's not just adults who witness something impossible, but a little kid in their own bedroom? That's exactly what you'll hear now. I remember that bedroom like I slept there just last night. The walls were a soft blue, covered with rocket stickers my mom put up after a grocery store promotion. The wooden bed creaked in a specific way whenever I turned over. The moon-shaped nightlight usually sat on the dresser, but that night it was off. And for some reason I remember the silence, thick, heavy, like it was swallowing sound, as if the whole house had held its breath. I was 5 years old. My parents, my older sister, and I lived in a single-story house on a quiet street, the kind with low hedges and neighbors who still waved at each other. Years later, my parents casually mentioned that the neighborhood had been built over an old indigenous burial ground. Back then, it was just a weird fact, something that didn't mean much to me. But now, I think it explains a lot. That night, I woke up with the clear sense that I wasn't alone in the room. It wasn't a noise. It wasn't movement. It was presence, like something was standing right beside me, watching. My body froze. I tried to move my feet, but they felt glued to the mattress. I tried to call for my mom, but my throat locked up. All I could do was stare at the ceiling, feeling that dark energy growing closer to my bed. Then something moved near the door, and that's when I saw it. There was a child, about my size, crouched on the floor. Its face was half hidden in the shadows, its long arms pressed against the ground, its body hunched over. The way it moved, it wasn't right. It crawled fast, like an animal, completely silent. As my eyes adjusted, I realized it wasn't wearing any clothes. But that wasn't the strangest part. What sent chills down my spine was its face, or rather the lack of one. It was like someone had erased where the eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. Just smooth, blank skin. No expression, no identity, a human blur. It crawled toward me with eerie speed as if it knew exactly where I was. When it reached the side of my bed, it vanished. Just slipped away, like it had melted into the floor. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But fear kept me paralyzed. Tears streamed down my face. Even though I couldn't see it anymore, I still felt it, lingering, watching. Minutes later, or maybe hours, I finally managed to make a sound. A weak, muffled cry, but enough for my mom to hear from her room. She rushed in, flipped on the light, and scooped me up. I was shaking so hard I could barely explain what had happened. I told her about the boy, the blank face, the way it crawled. She just said it was a nightmare, that it was normal, and that we'd leave the light on. She stayed with me until I fell back asleep. But the room wasn't the same after that. The next few days, everything seemed normal. School, snacks, afternoon cartoons. But at night, as soon as the lights went out, my heart would race for no reason. Every time the room went dark, the memory came flooding back. I'd lie awake for hours, eyes wide, waiting for it to return. And it did. One night, I woke up to something poking me. At first it was gentle, then harder. When I opened my eyes, I saw that blur of a person again, but this time it was standing beside my bed. Its body trembled, like it was cold. Its arms were outstretched, pushing against me. Not violently, but firmly, like it was trying to move me out of the way. I screamed, loud. By the time my parents rushed in, it was gone again. This time, my dad took it more seriously. He searched the whole room, checked the closet, under the bed, the window. Everything was locked. Everything was in place. But the fear didn't go away. I knew what I'd seen. I'd felt it. They started leaving the hallway light on and the door slightly open. It helped a little. But I slept with the covers pulled over my head, terrified of seeing that smooth, blank face again. I knew that if I saw it one more time, something inside me would break for good. Over time, the visit stopped. It never came back. But I was never the same, and that story stayed buried, half forgotten for years. Then one day as an adult, my dad let something slip during a barbecue. He mentioned that the house we'd lived in had been built over an old indigenous burial site, that some neighbors had talked about strange things, hearing noises, feeling presences, seeing shadows. And it all clicked. I became obsessed. I started researching the area, the people who had lived there before the neighborhood was built. I found records confirming that burial sites had been disturbed. Some remains had been removed, but others were left behind, buried beneath the foundations of the houses. Back then, no one talked about spiritual respect. They built over it like it was just empty land. And now I wonder, what if that presence, the boy, wasn't just a ghost? What if it was a manifestation of something that had been violated? A living memory of the land still holding on to its story. I don't romanticize it. I don't find it beautiful or poetic. It was a supernatural experience that marked me forever. A trauma, a wound that still throbs now and then, especially when I catch a quick movement out of the corner of my eye or hear a creak in the dead of night. I never saw the boy again. But even now, sometimes I wake up with the feeling that someone is standing in the corner of the room, watching, waiting, like whatever appeared to me as a child is still there, patient, silent, observing, and whenever that happens, I leave the light on. Terrifying. It's disturbing to imagine a child's spirit breaking into the silence of the night, but the fear gets even worse when you go looking for it on purpose. Like in the next story, where a group of friends decides to explore a British cemetery known for its legends, and finds out some of those legends are very real. But before we continue, if you made it this far, that means you're enjoying these stories. So hit the like button to let YouTube know you like this kind of content, so you don't miss any more horror stories. We just wanted to take some weird photos to post on Instagram. Seriously, it wasn't supposed to turn into anything. But that night, in the middle of that thick fog covering everything, it felt like we stumbled onto something that didn't want to be disturbed. Something old, something that never truly sleeps. We were all in that urban legend hunter phase, you know. Every town has its abandoned cemetery, a house where someone died in some strange way, a forest no one enters after sunset. For us, the target was the so-called British cemetery up in the hills of Real Monte, a lost remote place that even the locals avoid during the day. But to us, that was an invitation. We got there around 10 p.m. There were 4 of us, me, Jake, Mia, and Tyler. I brought my camera, Mia had her spirit box, that device that supposedly picks up voices from beyond, and Tyler carried a backpack with energy drinks, a flashlight, cigarettes, and borrowed courage. The entrance was through an old, heavy iron gate, rusted and creaking. The inscription at the top was eerie. "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord." I remember reading it out loud and feeling a chill that started in my stomach. It sounded like a line from some old horror movie, and the smell didn't help. There was something off in the air. It wasn't just mold and damp earth. There was a hint of sulfur, that sickly, sweet, rotten stench that makes your skin crawl. The ground was packed dirt, with loose stones scattered around, and the fog made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The silence was deafening. No wind, no crickets, nothing. We stepped inside slowly, laughing nervously, but every footstep echoed like there was a microphone buried in the ground. Then came the 3 knocks, dry, spaced out, like someone had slapped the palm of their hand against a wooden door. 1, 2, 3. Then nothing. We looked at each other, thinking it might be someone messing with us, but there was nowhere for anyone to hide. Just tombstones, gnarled trees, and rusted crosses. Jake said to ignore it. "First sign from beyond. Mark the checkpoint," he joked. And we kept walking. The only sounds were our breathing and our footsteps. But then we heard something else. A drum, far off, deep in the cemetery. A slow tribal rhythm, like a march. Mia froze. She said she'd read about some English clown who used to perform nighttime rituals there back in the 1800s. No one paid much attention, but no one laughed after that either. We turned left near a massive tombstone, one of those with carved angels, and that's when we heard it, whimpering like a child trying to hold back sobs. It was coming from behind a cracked, moss-covered headstone. I stepped forward, pulled by curiosity, and Mia whispered, "The girl buried alive, the legend, it was right here." The crying stopped as soon as we got close, and what we heard next was worse, scratching from inside the tomb, like fingernails on stone. Slow, rhythmic, desperate. Tyler took 2 steps back. Mia grabbed my arm. I just stood there, paralyzed, feeling the hair stand up from the back of my neck down my spine. The negative energy was so thick you could almost touch it. We backed away fast, trying to shift focus, taking another path between the graves. That's when we found the damned statue. A humanoid figure, all stone, but with no head or hands. Just a rigid body in a carved robe. Mia recognized it from the legends. If you turn your back to it and feel a touch, your eyes will bleed until they dry up. A stupid story, I know. But no one had the guts to test it. Of course, Tyler had to play the tough guy. He turned his back, stood there for a few seconds just to prove a point. Right as we were about to laugh at him, he jumped. Said he felt something tug at his shirt. At that exact moment, we heard the sound of a rope creaking. a dry, sharp noise coming from a twisted tree nearby. We looked up and saw the rope swinging from a branch. There wasn't a breath of wind. This time, no one laughed. Mia decided it was time to use the spirit box. We knelt on the damp ground, turned it on, and waited for the static to turn into something. At first, it was just white noise, that strange interference. But then, a voice. Clearly a voice. And it said Mia's name. Then mine. Then Tyler's. And then, like it was ripping through the air, the voice repeated Jake's name 3 times, just like the knocks at the beginning. The sulfur smell became unbearable. It burned our noses. A shadow moved in the distance between 2 trees. Mia stood up immediately. I grabbed Jake, who had gone pale, and pulled him along. Tyler was already walking fast, glancing back over and over. We ran to the gate, which seemed farther away than before, and even in our rush, I had the clear feeling that something was following us. It wasn't just the shadow we'd seen. It was the sensation of being watched. That certainty that something was right behind you, almost close enough to touch the back of your neck. As soon as we passed through the gate, the drumming stopped. The sulfur smell vanished instantly, but the silence remained. We got in the car and drove away without a word. No one spoke on the way back. No one looked behind us. To this day, every time someone mentions Real Monte, the British cemetery, or anything supernatural, I feel that same chill. I don't know what we saw that night. I don't know if it was real or if our minds were playing tricks. But one thing I know, the fear I felt that night was like nothing else. We never went back, never, not even to check if the statue is still there. And honestly, I'd rather keep it that way. So creepy. What did you think about this story? What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your opinion here in the comments. I remember the first time I felt that chill creep up from deep inside me, like something that shouldn't be there, was staring right at me. It was at the cemetery in Chiba, on an afternoon that turned to night way too fast. We just wanted to visit my grandma's grave like we did every year on her birthday, but that day, everything went wrong. There was an accident on the road, traffic that seemed like it would never end, and by the time we got there, the sun had already vanished behind the buildings. The cemetery gates were still open, but the place was already swallowed in this weird half-light. It wasn't quite night yet, but you had to strain your eyes to see anything. My parents decided to go ahead with the visit anyway. My mom said Grandma would understand the delay, that what mattered was us being there. My older sister Emily was sulking the whole way, her phone dead with no signal, her face locked in a scowl. I was 7 or 8 at the time. Everything seemed bigger back then. The headstones, the statues, even the silence felt heavier. And there was something about that day, a feeling of being watched. It wasn't just fear of the dark. It was thicker, like something was paying attention to every step we took. We walked to my grandma's grave in silence, carrying white flowers and incense. My dad set everything down, lit the incense, and bowed. My mom clasped her hands and began to pray softly. And that's when I saw it. Behind one of the big monuments, one that looked abandoned, with moss creeping up the edges and cracks running through the stone, there was someone. A figure just standing there, rigid, like it was trying to hide but not really trying at all. Its face was half covered in shadow, but I could make out what looked like an eye. Just one. The other side of its face was blank. Like something was missing. It didn't move, it just stared. I tugged at Emily's shirt and whispered that someone was there. She huffed, thinking I was making it up to scare her, but she looked anyway, and froze. I felt her hand grip my shoulder hard. She didn't say a word, but I saw it in her eyes. She saw it too. The figure stepped out from behind the monument and started moving toward us. But it didn't walk. It didn't make a sound. No footsteps, no dragging. It was like it glided, a weightless, unnatural movement, as if it was floating just above the ground without touching it. And the closer it got, the heavier the air felt. The incense smoke curled in a direction that wasn't the wind. The flame bent the wrong way. My mom was still praying, eyes closed, lost in her words. My dad, too. Only Emily and I were watching, paralyzed. Its eye, the only one that worked, was empty. But at the same time, it felt like it was piercing right through us. There was no anger, no sadness, nothing. Just an endless void. The energy around it was suffocating. A kind of spiritual weight pressing down on us from the inside. A discomfort you couldn't explain, only feel. When it reached our family's grave, it stopped. It didn't do anything, just stood there, watching. And even though it never opened its mouth, the feeling I got was that it wanted to be remembered. That it was there, asking for it. My dad suddenly lifted his head and looked around like he sensed something. He asked if everything was okay. My mom opened her eyes too, looking at us with concern. And that's when the figure drifted away. It vanished as silently as it had appeared, gliding back into the darkness until it disappeared behind the monument. Our parents never saw it, just Emily and me. We didn't say a word right then. Not in the car, not on the drive home. We stayed quiet, each of us trying to make sense of what had just happened. Years later, my dad died. A sudden heart attack, no warning. We had to go back to the Chiba cemetery for the funeral. It was a sad day, full of memories. And during the service, while we were waiting for the cremation, one of the staff mentioned that the big monument, the same one where I'd seen the one-eyed man, was a memorial for the Mwenbotoke, the so-called nameless dead. Spirits with no ties, no family, no one to pray for them. People who died alone, forgotten. Not even a name on their grave. When he said that, Emily turned to me with a look I'd never seen before. Not fear, understanding, sadness. She grabbed my hand and whispered, "That's what it was. He just wanted someone to see him." Since then, I've never been able to go to a cemetery without remembering that lonely eye. The way it glided, that heavy negative energy hanging in the air. But I've never been afraid either, because now I understand it wasn't anger, it wasn't a threat. It was loneliness. The desperation of someone forgotten by everyone, even time. Still, every time I think about that presence, I get chills, because no matter how much you try to rationalize it, some things don't follow logic. Some things are just too strange to explain, and sometimes, all a spirit wants is to be seen. Just once, by someone. But I'll never forget that stare. One empty eye, still, watching us like it had been waiting for a long, long time. And when I really think about it, maybe it had. Maybe it's still there, standing in the same spot, waiting for another pair of eyes to meet its own. And just imagining that is enough to make me keep my eyes shut tight every time I pass by that cemetery. If you made it all the way here, comment the phrase "one-eyed man." That way I'll know you stayed with me until the end. And don't forget to leave your like. That's what shows me these stories hooked you the same way they hooked me. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now. There are always more stories like these here. And don't stop here. There's another video right next to this one with more terrifying accounts. Click it and keep going with me over there.